So this has been probably the 5th time I've rewritten the script for this video because I've just been really struggling to gather my thoughts and feelings because after having finished a couple of weeks ago, I'm still digesting everything that's happened, and that's not something that happens to me often. In fact, it's only happened 3 times prior in all my years. So let's try and talk about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So I want to start off talking about the combat and how Sandfall have not made something wholly unique and new, but I feel like they perfected it. Because while turn-based combat with active elements isn't new, there's been a couple of attempts before: Mario RPG, Lost Odyssey, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the list goes on. Even Final Fantasy dipped a toe into this with 13's combat system, but that's a very distant comparison, but I'd argue this is what Square was trying to flirt with at the time. But Sandfall took this entire concept and fully leant into it and finally cracked what turn-based combat needs to do to not just survive but thrive in a modern game landscape. And I'm going to stand by that, but slightly contradict it by saying, despite knowing full well that other studios will copy this, I absolutely do not want this system to become the new norm. Like, my one singular hope is that this inspires studios to try new things with turn-based combat and leave this exact system to Sandfall and Clair Obscur as a series. It's a bit of a selfish hope, I know, and one that's totally unrealistic, but I'm going to stand by it. And it's not just the live elements of the combat, it's also in the build systems and the variety and the freedom that the Picto and Lumina system allow. And for how much I adore everything here because it's so reminiscent of the materia from 7 mixed in with 10 sphere grid, it does have one major glaring issue that I'm not sure if anyone had a similar experience to me or not, but the freedom they give you towards the end of the game comes at a massive cost to the narrative and the feel of everything. And I want to make it clear, I didn't grind anything, I wasn't over leveled, I went into the final boss in the 50 to 60 range, and I hadn't done any major build crafting at the time. But they give you a Picto that removes the classic 9,999 damage cap, and it completely changes how you approach even just the basic enemy fights, and has a really bad effect on the final area as a whole, and I just feel like it's a massive oversight on their part to not balance everything around this. And balance and scaling is hard, and I appreciate that, but it feels like the game wasn't ready for that Picto to be used, and it shouldn't be down to the player to intentionally nerf themselves for the sake of the narrative. This is literally my only complaint about the whole experience, and I'm not deducting any points for it. I'm bringing it up solely because it was a frustration because it changed how I played the game. Because I went from learning every single enemy timing, parrying, jumping, etc. to simply never seeing the enemy do anything because everything's getting one shot. Like, thankfully I took it off before I got to the final boss, and thank God I did because that's one of my top boss fights of all time, and I would have been so upset if I missed out on that first experience. But also in the end game, I've totally missed out on one of the super boss fights because I thought the health pool was bigger, and I'm now kind of spooked for the final one, but I might just do it for the sake of the platinum and come back to it in New Game Plus. But that's literally the only drawback. It's a simple fix, maybe not for this game, but for future Clair Obscur games. I hope it's a lesson they learn and take on moving forward, because I totally understand why they did what they did. It fits the narrative. All I asked for is more of a tweak to health pools, or even if it was a second damage cap, that would have been perfect. But at the end of the day, I'm not a game developer, I'm just a lover of stories and narratives, and seeing something get in the way of that slightly when it's as strong as this game is kind of frustrating. And just one more thing, this will be a slight endgame spoiler, it's nothing huge, but super bosses should absolutely be added to the Ender's Tower once you've beaten them out in the world map, because I find it insane you can fight merchants as many times as you want, but not the super bosses. But that's more of what I'd like to be added in, and it's not a knock against the game in the slightest. But I'm going to put a pin in that and use it to dovetail into the narrative of this game, because honestly, wow, I haven't been this captivated by a story straight from the jump in years. Like, there's obviously games I love, 14 is a great example of that, so I'm not putting anything else down to raise this game up, I'm just purely doing the raising part because this game resonated with me on a whole different level. And as I said at the start, it's to the extent that only 3 things have done prior, and those 3 things are Final Fantasy VII, Spirited Away, and Neon Genesis Evangelion. For those that don't know, they're my favourite game, movie and TV show of all time, and Clair Obscur, whether intentional or not, takes from these 3 things, and obviously a lot of other things, and it wears its influences with such pride. There's no shameless rip-offs or embarrassment at what it's doing. It's continuing the legacy that they've laid before it. And I'm bringing these up not just because they're my all-time favourites, but because I see so much of them in how this story is told. Its narrative structure is identical to 7. The characters understand exactly what made Cloud, Tifa and Aerith so impactful, and also the sense of adventure that game has, and I feel like it shares a sense of self-discovery and joy and hope that Spirited Away has underneath its surface, despite how bleak things can look. And it tackles the themes of depression and grief and despair and hopelessness and our choices when dealing with those things in the same way that Neon Genesis does, in such a masterful and tasteful way. And you might not agree with any of this, and it might not be the intention from Sandfall at all, but that never means the comparisons can't be made. And naturally I'm trying to be as spoiler free as possible, because I would be devastated if I'm ever the reason why this game is ruined for someone, because every conceivable level of storytelling is used here to its fullest. The written narrative is phenomenal. The fact they found Jennifer Svedberg Yen, I hope I pronounced that correctly, on Reddit, is not the only crazy story the studio has, but the acting from everyone. Charlie Cox, Andy Serkis, Ben Starr, Jennifer English, Kirsty Ryder, Charlotte Nix, Rich Keeble, Maxence Carzola, honestly, wow, like everyone brings their A game for this, including the motion capture artists, because the amount of character work here that's done by the body language and the smallest movements to where a character is looking is honestly, it's immaculate. It's some of the best work I've seen. And also the music tells the entire story by itself. Laurie and Testard, who they got from an obscure indie music forum, by the way, that told the story so perfectly that I genuinely believe this is the best soundtrack to anything in about 30 years. Because whilst there's hundreds of different pieces of music in the game, the two that are the absolute standouts and encompass the entire game for me are Lumiere and Un Vieux Timide. Lumiere has that fleeting and playful and calm bounce to it, but there's also a joy in there, but it's an acknowledgement that it's not going to last. But then Un Vieux Timide is the exact opposite of that. It's aggressive, it's desperate, there's a hope in there, but it's that desperation that really drags it along. If you also translate the lyrics, this is really evident, by the way. And they're my two main takeaways from the story for this game, both hope and desperation. Which I find there's something incredible about what's fundamentally a tragedy from start to finish, but the game never loses itself and drowns in the sorrow of itself, and it remembers to have these moments of levity, and it's honestly genuinely hilarious, and to have these moments in there is so incredibly important. But that's going to be the last thing I say for this video. This game, despite my one frustration, is perfect from top to bottom. I really genuinely hope that Clair Obscur becomes a long-running anthology series like a la Final Fantasy. I hope they continue to push the genre forward and continue to understand fully what makes the classic PlayStation 1 era of RPGs work and why they're still so highly regarded. Because I'm at the point now where I will forever play whatever Sandfall sell me now, because they've truly captured and made something incredibly special, and I'll be eternally thankful for them for that. So if you haven't guessed, this is absolutely my game of the year. In fact, it's my game of the generation. I apologize to the rest of this generation that's happening right now, because this is such a high bar to clear, and this is easily in my top 5 of all time. So with that, do all the good stuff, like, comment and subscribe, hit the bell and stick with the channel for all the cool content we got coming out. Check out Pro and Noob, we wrapped up Cowboy Bebop and are looking ahead for the next anime I'm going to be putting Jared through. I've also got some different kind of video ideas that I'm excited to get to work on, and as always, I've been Mix692, you've been great, and this has been my Clair Obscur Expedition 33 review, so peace!